Two neighbors, same block, same year they both started working. Marcus drives a new car, nice watch, takes 2 vacations a year. His Instagram looks exactly like what success is supposed to look like. When people at parties ask him how he's doing, he says, "Living the dream," and he means it. David drives a 6-year-old Honda, wears the same 3 shirts to every casual event, orders water when everyone else orders cocktails. People quietly feel a little sorry for him. They assume he's struggling. 15 years pass. Marcus files for bankruptcy. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way financial collapse usually happens. Slowly, then all at once. The car gets repossessed on a Tuesday morning. The vacations go on credit cards he can no longer service. His entire financial life was a performance that finally ran out of audience. David retires at 47. Not to a mansion, not to a yacht. He just stops. He walks away from his job on a Wednesday, goes home, makes coffee, and reads for 4 hours. Because he can. Because everything he built over 15 years was invisible, and that was the whole point. Same street, same starting line, completely different lives. This isn't about being cheap. It isn't about depriving yourself or living like a monk or pretending money doesn't matter. It's about understanding that real wealth has an invisibility problem. The people who have it, you usually can't tell, and the people who look like they have it, most of them are one missed paycheck away from a very difficult conversation. The things that build wealth are quiet, almost boring. They don't photograph well. Nobody's making a reel about their automatic transfer to a brokerage account. And because those things are invisible, most people never learn them. They learn the performance of wealth instead of the construction of it. What I'm going to show you are 12 principles, real, practical, psychologically grounded, that people use to build serious financial lives without ever announcing it, without showing off, without anyone around them noticing it's happening. These aren't tips, they're shifts in how you see money, and once you see it this way, you genuinely cannot unsee it. Rule 1. Lifestyle capture. Your biggest financial threat is not your income, it's your visible lifestyle. Most people treat income as the primary variable in building wealth. Earn more, have more. It sounds obvious because it sounds logical, but it's wrong. The real variable is the gap between what you earn and what you visibly spend. That gap, that invisible, unglamorous space, is where wealth actually lives. Here's what happens in real life. Someone gets a raise. Let's say it's a meaningful one, $400 more per month after tax. Within 60 days, they have a nicer apartment, or a car payment that went up, or they're eating out more, or they upgraded their phone plan. The raise disappears into a lifestyle upgrade that is now permanent. The new floor becomes the new normal. Economists call this lifestyle inflation, but the more accurate term is lifestyle capture. Your spending captures your income the moment it arrives, and it never lets go. The quiet wealth builders do something different. When income goes up, their visible life stays the same. The raise disappears, but not into spending, into assets. Nobody notices because nothing changed on the surface. The hidden consequence is this. A person earning $60,000 who captures every raise will always feel broke. A person earning $60,000 who lets the gap grow becomes quietly wealthy. Same income, different outcome. Rule 2. Every purchase has a second price tag nobody shows you. This is one of the most important financial concepts almost nobody learns in a useful way. When you buy something for $200, you're not just paying $200. You're paying $200 plus the future value of that $200, which, invested over 30 years at a reasonable market return, could be somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000. That's the second price tag. A car isn't a $30,000 decision, it's potentially a $250,000 decision when you account for what that money could have become over a working lifetime, plus insurance, plus maintenance, plus the psychological cost of a payment that limits every other financial choice you make. Nobody shows you the second price tag. Salespeople certainly don't.
The finance department at a dealership is not going to hand you a sheet that says, here's what this purchase costs today, and here's what it costs in opportunity forever. But here's what most people miss. The second price tag works in reverse, too. Every dollar you redirect into an appreciating asset has a second price tag on the upside. $200 invested today isn't $200. It's a seed for something much larger. That's the math quiet wealth builders are doing in their heads when everyone else is seeing one price. Rule 3. Automation is not a convenience feature. It's a psychological bypass. Willpower is a depleting resource. This is not a motivational metaphor. It is a documented psychological reality. Decision fatigue is real. The more choices you make during the day, the lower the quality of your later decisions. And money decisions are almost always later decisions, made when your resistance is lowest. This is why most saving and investing strategies fail. They rely on you actively choosing at the end of every month to move money somewhere intentional. But by the end of the month, you've made 1,000 small decisions, absorbed stress from work, navigated social pressure to spend, and convinced yourself that this month was unusually hard and you deserved to treat yourself. The solution is to never give yourself the choice. Automated transfer on the day you get paid, before you see the money, before it sits in your account looking available, before any mental accounting tells you it's yours to spend. A specific amount moves to a specific account automatically. You wake up the day after payday, and the decision has already been made by the version of you that set it up 3 months ago. The people building quiet wealth are not more disciplined than average. They're just better at designing systems that remove discipline from the equation entirely. Rule 4. The accounts your money sits in matter more than you think. Keeping savings in your primary checking account is one of the most quietly costly things most people do, and almost nobody talks about it. When money is visible and accessible, it gets spent. Not because you're irresponsible, because proximity to money changes behavior. Your brain treats available money as spendable money, almost regardless of what you intended it for. The fix is structural separation. Different accounts with different friction to access. An emergency fund at a separate bank where you don't have a debit card. Investments in accounts that require intentional action to withdraw. Savings labeled with a purpose that changes how you psychologically perceive the money. I'm not done yet because there's also the interest dimension. Keeping large sums in a standard checking account that earns nothing when high-yield savings accounts exist is a passive, invisible loss happening every month. On $10,000, the difference between 0% and 5% is $500 a year you're simply leaving on the table for no reason. The wealthy don't keep money where it's comfortable, they keep it where it works. Rule 5. Debt has a personality, and most people can't tell which type is talking to them. There is debt that builds something, a mortgage on a property that appreciates, a business loan that generates returns exceeding its cost, a student loan for a credential that meaningfully increases income. This debt is not comfortable, but it can be strategic. Then there is consumer debt, credit card balances, buy now, pay later plans, personal loans used to maintain a lifestyle, car loans on vehicles that lose value the moment you sign the paper. This debt is quietly devastating in a way people rarely calculate. A $5,000 credit card at 22% interest, carried for 5 years with minimum payments, will cost you more than the original purchase in interest alone. You are paying twice for something you may no longer own or use. Every month that balance exists, a portion of your future income is already claimed by your past decisions. But here's what most people miss. Consumer debt doesn't just cost money, it costs optionality. When you carry high-interest debt, you cannot take the job with the lower salary that's better aligned with your life. You cannot weather a difficult season without panic. You cannot make the investment when the opportunity appears. Your choices narrow invisibly over time, and the debt is the reason why. Quiet wealth builders treat consumer debt the way they treat a leak in the roof, not as something to manage, as something to eliminate. Rule 6. The most expensive things in your financial life are the things you pay for monthly. Subscriptions, memberships, recurring charges, these are psychologically designed to be invisible. A $14 monthly charge doesn't feel like a $168 annual decision. It feels like nothing. It barely registers, and that's the point. Open your bank statements for the last 3 months. Write down every recurring charge. Add them up. The number will be larger than you expect. Most people underestimate it by 30 to 50%. Some of those charges are for services you actively use and genuinely value. Keep those. But some of them are for things you forgot you signed up for, haven't used in months, and would never choose to pay for if the decision were put in front of you fresh today. The psychology here is powerful. Canceling a subscription feels like a loss, even if you haven't used the service.
So people keep paying for things they don't use because canceling feels worse than the monthly charge. The company that built your subscription service understood this before you signed up. Recurring spending is death by 1,000 small decisions you already made and can't remember making. Rule 7. Your social environment is a financial environment. The single most underappreciated variable in personal finance is peer group. The people around you set the invisible standard for what is normal to spend, what counts as success, and what a reasonable life looks like. And you absorb that standard without ever being aware it's happening. If everyone in your immediate social circle buys a new car every 3 years, driving a paid-off older vehicle will feel like failure, even if it's the better financial decision. If everyone goes on expensive trips, staying home will feel like deprivation, even if it's a genuine choice. The comparison is constant and largely unconscious. This doesn't mean you need to isolate yourself or stop enjoying life with people you care about, but it does mean recognizing that your financial behavior is partly a social behavior shaped by the group norms around you. And if those norms are expensive, you are paying for them, whether you recognize it or not. It gets worse. The people spending visibly are often the ones with the least actual wealth. They need the signal. The people with genuine financial security rarely need to announce it, so you may be comparing yourself to a standard that is itself largely fictional.
Rule 8. An emergency fund isn't a savings account. It's a decision protection account. Most people understand emergency funds in theory and underfund them in practice. 3 to 6 months of expenses sits in the account in concept. In reality, it's 2 weeks of expenses and a lot of good intentions. Here's the real function of an emergency fund that nobody explains correctly. It isn't there to pay for emergencies. It's there to make sure that emergencies don't become financial catastrophes, and more importantly, that ordinary financial pressure doesn't force you into permanently bad decisions. Without a buffer, a car repair becomes a credit card balance that takes 18 months to pay off. A job loss becomes a forced sale of investments at the wrong time. A medical bill becomes debt that restructures your entire budget for years. The emergency itself might be minor. The financial chain reaction it triggers is what damages you. With a real buffer, you make the car repair and it's over. You lose the job and you have time to find the right next position rather than the first available one. The buffer converts acute crises into inconveniences. It protects every other financial decision you make. Rule 9. The language you use about money is a map of your financial outcomes. People say things like, "I can't afford that," and "money is stressful," and "I'm just not good with money." And they say these things so often and so automatically that the statements stop feeling like descriptions and start feeling like facts. They are not facts. They are habits of thought that produce habits of behavior. "I can't afford that" closes a question. "How could I afford that, and is it worth it?" opens a process. One produces passivity, the other produces analysis and decision-making. The people building quiet wealth ask different questions, not magical thinking questions, practical, operational ones. What would I need to change to make this possible? Is this a priority or a habit? What am I actually optimizing for? Your internal narrative about money runs constantly. It shapes every decision you make before you're consciously aware you're making one.
Paying attention to that narrative and challenging it deliberately is one of the quietest and most powerful financial moves available to anyone. Rule 10. Most financial mistakes aren't moments, they're systems. People talk about financial mistakes as events. I made a bad investment. I overspent one month. I took on too much debt. But most real financial damage isn't a single decision. It's a system, a repeating pattern of small decisions that compounds negatively over time, the same way good decisions compound positively. Overspending isn't a Tuesday, it's what happens every Tuesday because of how the week is structured, what's in the refrigerator, what apps are on the phone, and what the default option is when energy is low. Fix one Tuesday and nothing changes. Fix the system and every Tuesday changes. This means that the most valuable financial work you can do is auditing your defaults. What happens when you don't make an intentional choice? Where does money go on autopilot? What do you buy when you're tired, stressed, or bored? Those defaults are your actual financial system, and they're producing your actual financial results. Rule 11. Time in the market is not a strategy, it is the strategy. There is an enormous amount of financial content about what to invest in, which stocks, which funds, which asset class, which timing. Almost none of it produces better results than the simplest possible approach executed consistently over a long period. A person who invests a modest amount monthly into low-cost index funds for 30 years will, in the overwhelming majority of historical scenarios, significantly outperform most active strategies, most timing-based approaches, and most people who spend enormous energy trying to optimize their portfolio. The math behind compound growth is not a metaphor, it is arithmetic. Money growing at a consistent rate doubles roughly every 7 to 10 years. That means $20,000 invested at 35 is not $20,000 at 65. It's something closer to $160,000, depending on returns. Without you touching it, without you making a single clever decision. Just time. The people who know this stop looking for the better strategy and start protecting their ability to keep going. Market drops become irrelevant. Short-term volatility becomes noise. The question stops being, what should I buy, and starts being, how do I make sure I never stop investing regardless of what happens? Rule 12. The goal is not to look wealthy. The goal is to have options. This is the principle that contains all the others. Wealth that is performed is wealth that is consumed. Every dollar spent on looking successful is a dollar that does not become freedom. The car, the watch, the vacations announced on social media, these things have value if they genuinely bring joy and are genuinely affordable. They become traps when they're purchased primarily for the signal they send. Real wealth is options. The option to leave a job that's harming you. The option to take a year off when your child is young. The option to help someone you love when they need it. The option to weather uncertainty without panic. The option to say no to things you don't want because you're not financially cornered. None of these options photograph well. None of them appear in a highlight reel. They are invisible, just like the process that creates them. And that invisibility is not a flaw in the strategy. It is the strategy. Marcus and David grew up on the same street. They had access to the same jobs, the same banks, the same financial system. The difference between their outcomes at 47 was not income, it was not luck, it was not education. It was what each of them decided to make visible. Marcus built a life that looked like the life he wanted. David built a life that actually was the life he wanted. Marcus performed wealth for 15 years. David constructed it quietly, one automated transfer at a time, one foregone car payment at a time, one boring financial decision after another, until the construction was complete. The morning David walked away from his job and made coffee and sat down to read, nobody on the street noticed anything had changed. His car was the same, his house was the same, his shirts were the same, but everything was different, and it had been different for years. The question worth sitting with is this: what are you building right now, and who is it actually for?